How do I start this thing?
Have you plugged the bloody USB in?
Yeah, it's in.
Nah, man, that's the wrong port. Oh, wait, it's flashing now.
Is it oh, wait, it's recording.
Well, let's start this thing, fool!
Hello, everyone. I'm Amelia.
Hi, I'm Sam. Welcome to Ask the Duo podcast, a podcast where we get deep into those late-night, unfiltered conversations.
We'll be discussing all things lifestyle, relationship, mindset, and more.
Alright, let's get to it! What's that?
What's that? We've got some Wishy bubble milk tea, pearl milk tea.
It's been a while since we had that, actually.
Yeah, it's good. Have you ever wondered why people call it bubble milk tea? Because I've always called it pearl milk tea.
I don't even know why it's called bubble, yeah.
Because of the pearls, looks like bubbles. Black bubbles.
Oh, no. Oh, maybe they're thinking of that bubble game. You know, that puzzle bubble?
The bubble.
Yeah, puzzle bubble.
That's such a good game.
Yeah, it's good shit.
Yeah. Well, anyways, we are approaching our 10-year anniversary in the dating life.
Shit.
As in dating each other, not in the dating world. So we've been out of the dating world for 10 years.
Yeah, mate.
We've hit the X in Roman numerals.
Jeez. Yeah, it's been a while, isn't it?
How do you feel about that?
How do you feel about that?
How do you feel about that?
Stick the microphone in your face,
yeah,
mate.
I'm going to stick it in your face. Too bad you're lucky you're too far away.
Yeah, you're
How
lucky,
do you feel
mate.
about
You're lucky, mate.
Well, jokes aside, we wanted to take this time to reflect on how a relationship has been like back then versus now, and also hopefully give you guys some tips on how we've navigated and what we've learned and picked up along the way between our 10 years of being together. And obviously these tips are what worked for us or something that we've learned for our own relationship, and every relationship's different. So it may or may not work for you guys, but it's just interesting to share if you guys have maybe a similar personality to us.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, mama.
I'm saying, motherfuckers. Let's talk about how we used to be as a couple. So how we are today, I would say we mold together quite well. Like, we have a good balance and we're very adaptable to each other's personalities, and we can, switch how we are between each other depending how the other person's feeling.
Yep.
But I wouldn't say we were always like that.
Fuck no. Nah, man.
Like, back then, I'm speaking maybe the first or second year when we started dating, even though I knew you for 6 years, but we didn't know each other on that kind of level. And I would say the biggest thing, the difference between us back then was you were very reactive, so you can get pissed off really easily. But the thing is, when you get pissed off, sometimes you need to talk about why you're pissed or what you're feeling, or even talk about things before you get to that angry state.
Yeah.
But a lot of the times you didn't express that. Like, you would just express your anger, but you didn't express the reasons behind it or what triggered you. And I will only find out about that maybe 4 or 5 arguments down later, or disagreements. And that's 6 months later. My personality is a person that I just stay quiet, and, I don't want to trigger anyone. I don't want to make the situation worse. And that did kind of carry through between our relationship. So if you became reactive like that, I would just stay quiet and, let you vent or let you get angry. I would just ask, what's wrong, what happened. But because you're a person that's close, you're like, oh, no, nothing, don't worry about it. Then I'm like, oh, okay. And that didn't dig deeper.
You were very traditional in terms of being very timid, submissive, quiet. So, like you said, you would just sit there and accept it. You wouldn't give me your feedback. You wouldn't tell me how you truly felt.
Well, it wasn't I didn't give you feedback or I didn't tell you how you truly felt. It's more like I just didn't dig deeper into the problem and actually truly understand why you were feeling a certain way. Because one, you're very surface level reactive and I was surface level and keeping quiet and not trying to make the situation worse.
Yeah. And I think for me, I feel that at that time, like you mentioned, I was extremely reactive. I was pretty angry all the time. So, you know, I never really stopped and thought about how I felt before actually reacting. And that was my huge issue back then. It was just, I think it was a maturity level thing too, but I always reacted without actually thinking.
Yeah, because I remember many conversations, so this is before we lived together, where I don't remember the exact situation, but it would be things where like you'd get pissed off or something and then you would just run off and be like, oh, I'm gonna go, like you tell me you went for a drive with your friends or something, and throughout that few hours after we've had a disagreement you didn't really talk to me, which is fine, like we're letting each other cool off. Then you would message me late at night and be like, I'm sorry for reacting this way. Like that's always your start of the conversation is, I'm sorry I reacted that way. I shouldn't have because of blah, blah, blah. I reacted wrong. And that was always the start of the conversation.
Yeah, and I think during that time I used that moment of going out to really reflect on myself as well as us. And I think that's why at that time I would always start conversations like that, or I come back to it at a later time.
Yeah, so yeah, I can see that we've come a long way from that, but let's just dig into some of the top things that we've learned. Did you want to start off with one of your relationship tips?
Yeah, so the biggest thing that I would say that, you know, start of the tip is
Start of the tip.
Well, not that kind of tip, mate. Relax, all right? Calm down, mate.
No, you looked at me. Why'd you lock eyes with me when you said that?
Nah, you were looking at me, brother.
No.
All right.
It's a conversation. Go look at each other's eyes.
Well, the first tip that I would suggest is, obviously in the early stages of beginning a relationship, try not to go in a relationship with that expectation or material expectation for your partner, and really embrace and appreciate who they are.
Yeah, I think.
And grow to learn about each other.
I think that's really true. But for me, how I interpret that, it's more like I agree with this point. It's more like you hear a lot of people have, you know, a list of things that they want to see in a guy. Like, you know, tall, have money or something like that, whatever it may be. But if you kind of let go of some of those materialistic expectations, you truly see someone for who they are rather than expecting who they should be. Like, you know, you expected this guy to pull out the chair for you when you go to a restaurant or open the door for you. And if they didn't do that, you kind of get disappointed. But you shouldn't let those things affect the relationship.
Yeah, and I think obviously it's going to be harder in the earlier stages or when you're just meeting someone, because you're going in with a set expectation, but you're only seeing the person for their physical value or their actions. So what you're also trying to say is don't write it off because one thing or two things is a killer for you.
And also you got to think, especially early in the relationship, sometimes people just need to warm up to it too. Like, obviously you don't want to be waiting forever for a certain thing to happen, but you got to think how important is that to you as opposed to finding someone who truly loves you for you.
Yeah. And that obviously takes time because you need to get to know that person as well, right? So understanding who they are, but not writing them off straight away. So,
and how that worked with us, I think for me personally, I didn't have a certain list. I don't know if that's affected because I've known you already, so I know who you are, so I didn't have a list. But there was nothing that I was checking you against. I just was truly trying to enjoy the relationship for us being a relationship, and then growing to truly learn to see how you are as a person and also seeing how you grow. And that's what I meant by this. Don't start off a relationship with materialistic expectations.
Yeah.
Was it the same with you?
Well, for me, I feel that going into this relationship, I didn't have expectations. I knew that, yes, there is going to be things that we needed to work on, right? But I never, what's that word? I never
held me accountable.
Well, I never set criterias for you because I knew that I was in it for the long run.
Did you do that with any other previous relationships?
Well, with the previous relationships, I was just going with the flow. It's the same thing.
Yeah,
like
so it's still the same.
Yeah, all my, past relationships, I never set an expectation because the whole point of a relationship is experience and to be together and enjoy each other's time together. So it was just that, experience that you're going through together. So if there were things that I may not be happy with, depending on what it is, right? Like if it's a habit, you can change those things. You can work together. And I was happy to work with someone even if they had problems.
Yeah.
So that was my mind frame going into our relationship.
And I think another one to add to it is kind of obvious, people talk about it, is understand each other's love language. But I think also how you guys argue or have disagreements, the argument language is also important. And why this is important for us and how it worked is our love language. I think thankfully our love language is quite similar. Like quality time and acts of service is quite similar. But understanding that, I think even within that there's differences. There's like different ways of how you see acts of service or quality time. Like for example, our quality time is actually quite different. Like some people might see quality time as like you truly have to go out on a date. Whereas you, like if I was sitting next to you at the computer and we're not really interacting, I'm just there, my presence is there, you also find that as quality time.
Yeah.
Whereas like mine, it differs. Like sometimes depending on what we're doing, it can or cannot be quality time. So even that's different. So you need to understand that. And argument language. So, like some people may like to argue, like if they have a disagreement, one person wants to hash it out then and there. And another person may like to cool off for a bit, come back together and discuss the problems. So understanding that is really important.
Yep. Yeah, that actually is really important because not understanding your partner's, I guess, you wouldn't say criteria, how they act and react depending on that moment is vital to work together in that relationship. Yeah,
and on top of that, it's like outside of that, understanding how to also, like you don't not necessarily be like, okay, calm down, like you need to calm down kind of thing, but know how to calm them down so that you guys can have a proper conversation. Rather than be like, whoa, this is too much, you calm down. That would only make someone pissed off.
Yeah.
But if you understand how the other person needs you to help them calm them down, that is really helpful too. And, speaking of this argument or disagreement language, something that we've discovered pretty recently, because we had a disagreement not too long ago, was how when I bring up a problem, you yourself is just thinking about that immediate problem that triggered the argument, right? Whereas I, at that point in time, was thinking about that situation, but also other similar situations that happened in the past is grouped together. So I'm like trying to explain that, but you're disagreeing. So that brings up another argument because you're like, no, I'm only talking about this point in time. Why are you talking about the past? Whereas I'm like, no, I'm not trying to bring up the past in terms of trying to, keep digging up the past, but it's more like trying to explain to you that this is a thing that's happened multiple times.
Yeah, and that's something that took me a little bit of time to understand, because obviously people always say that you don't argue about the past. Once you've argued about something and that's the past, you move on. So when it comes to this particular scenario, it's like, well, if we have an argument, I'm addressing that argument as of that moment.
Yeah. And then it's just trying to get you to understand it's not that I'm trying to bring up the past, but if it's something that's been resolved, been archived into the files or whatever, I don't know how to say it, that's fine. But it's something that's reoccurring or has occurred again. So I feel like you can bring it back up. Like, one, so that it can help you relate, to help you see how I felt a similar way, like felt frustrated or sad or disappointed in a similar situation that's happened in the past. And in this situation, you've done it again. And I'm just explaining to you, like, why I feel that way and how you should, to help you understand.
Yeah. And I think that's the immediate reaction is, you've brought up an issue that is of present, because I would have done something as of that moment that's brought it up, and not understanding the fact that you are obviously repeating it because it's happened in the past. But it's also trying to understand that the past moments also shouldn't be brought up because it's linked in some way.
Yeah. And like, what actually opened my eyes to this similar situation is this TV show that we're watching. Is a reality TV show about couples who are deciding if they should stay with them or choose a different partner. And it was the same thing. The guy had the same situation where he didn't understand why this girl was talking about all these other things during the argument when he was focusing on that pure argument at that point in time. So it was exactly the same situation as us. So I was like, is this just a difference in between how guys and girls see or argue? And if we had a better understanding of that, that would help us as well, because then we're not going around in circles.
Yeah. And I think that could be a male and female difference.
I'm not sure if it is. I think, maybe some females might do the same thing, but it
seems more predominant in the differences. But I'm not saying that it is a definite difference, but it just seems like males would see that present moment of the argument and not really talk about the whole overall argument.
Bigger picture or the ripple effects of that situation. Yeah, which I think is good. So that's why I say understand each other's love languages, which is something that you hear a lot, but also understand each other's argument language. And then the next one, in terms of understanding each other, this is more for early stages or when you're trying to develop or understand if you should move into the serious relationship. This is more something you have to judge yourself, and there's a fine line between the two, but it's understanding the other person's habits versus their characteristics. And what I mean by that is, for example, how you were quite closed, you didn't know how to express your emotions. That's more like a habit, like you've always kept closed, you didn't speak your thoughts, and it took you a while to open up. That's something that I feel you can work on. Whereas if this person was genuinely a very quiet person and that's just how they are, that's the characteristics. So if you know that and try to gauge between the habit versus characteristics, it helps you understand if you can move forward together as a couple and work through that together, or if you are just completely two different people and he may not be the person that you were looking for in the end. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Understanding the differences between habits and characteristics.
Yeah.
Because characteristics is a person's character, Whereas a habit, you can also change, amend it, depending on how you guys mold to each other.
And why I say it's a fine line is because it's also depending if you're willing to spend some time and work with this person or work together to work on this, habit or something that's not there or not perfect in the relationship versus something that you just want to let go. You don't want to spend time.
It all comes down to you as an individual too, because that person's habit could be something that is a grinder for you, something that you just fucking hate. So, like you said, it's a fine line depending on yourself as to whether you could say, well, that is something I can deal with and work with, or if that's something that's a no deal big X.
Yeah. So, like, bringing it back to us, saying how you're really reactive in the early years, you were really reactive for the first good chunk of half of our relationship, and you didn't really start to calm down till later on. And if I gave up on that, we wouldn't be together right now. And that is actually a deal breaker for me. But I guess like your personality, your character outside of these things helped me see that you are able to change, that I kind of stuck through it and also helped you grow out of that.
Do you think it outweighed that particular thing you didn't like?
Well, yeah, like if it didn't, I wouldn't be here right now.
Yeah.
But that's just like, an example of what I mean between habit versus characteristic.
Yeah.
And if you're willing to work through it together.
Yeah. No, that's a good example to that one. So the next one that I actually added to this list was listen before reacting.
Yeah, which falls off the back of that.
Yeah. Then speak your mind, but also be cautious on how you speak. So using a neutral tone, because, your partner may interpret or misinterpret your message in a negative way. For me, talking from experience, it's like, well, if you react before listening, then that's just your emotions that is firing straight away, right? You're not thinking about the actual scenario, the actual situation at hand. You're just reactive on your own emotions. So stopping and taking the time to just listen to the person talk, understand and comprehend what they are saying, then speaking your mind, it's going to help you not just in your relationship, but just you in general too.
Yeah, and sometimes if you react without thinking and not thinking about the outcome or how it could make someone else feel or what kind of position it might put someone in, like, that's not a good thing to have and it's not a good habit to have.
Yeah, 100%. And this also does apply to outside of relationships as well.
Yep.
So even for me, like that, this has helped me in my professional world to just slow down and listen and then act from that point.
Yeah.
Something else I wanted to add to that is be comfortable with communicating, reflecting, and discussing problems or issues. That those could be like a good thing or a bad thing as well. But having an open forum with each other is really good.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate the communication that we have between each other, like good or bad. Like we just blab to each other, talk, have a conversation. And, if there's something that we don't like, we'll just talk about it. And it doesn't have to, like, I think way before I would associate not liking something or, being disappointed in a relationship, it's always bad, or you need to be angry, or you need to be loud, you need to be yelling at each other. But it doesn't have to be that way. If you don't like something, you can just, bring that person up and just be like, hey, this situation that happened, it didn't make me feel good. I just felt a bit disappointed. And you can just, have a level ground conversation and you don't need to be yelling down each other's throats.
Yeah. And I think this relates to us heavily because on our earlier days, we were probably more reserved. Well, you're probably more reserved, but I held everything in. until we sort of understood each other and I guess had more confidence in our communication, being able to have an open forum like this where we can talk about situations, scenarios, or problems or issues, it's helped us understand us on a deeper level.
Yeah, when you were just speaking about that, it just brought back memories. I think the reason why, I think it was good how we developed our relationship because we were so reserved, but we were still willing to share and open our feelings or talk about things that we didn't like. We were very calm about our disagreements. That's why when people are like, oh, have you guys argued? We actually didn't have any arguments for the good first like 4 or 5 years or whatever. It was always disagreements, but we talk about it really calm. Then we kind of opened up a bit more. And then I think as we became extremely comfortable with each other, that's when we started to talk and tell each other what we don't like or what we like at that point in time. But then it grew into actually like yelling and all that kind of stuff, which is not good, but it's like we've gone through different stages. But I think it was good that we started off with that calm state first because that helped us kind of open up. And then now we're just navigating and learning how to get back and talk in a more level-headed rather than yelling at each other, which we don't really yell at each other. We still don't, but it is a little more heated and more passionate when we disagree about something.
Yeah, and I think what you said is true in terms of if being level-headed in the earlier days, because I think if we started off as aggressive yelling, it potentially may have affected the relationship in a different way. Yeah. Because we were still sort of learning each other and that sort of stuff.
Especially when you're still very reactive too. I don't think that would have been good. But yeah, that's still our story, our journey, so it's different. But yeah, definitely don't yell at each other. It's not good. It's a bad habit, which, you know, that's something that we will work on. But
yeah, I mean, not just a bad habit though, but you're not centered. You're not in the right mind frame when you're arguing, or not even arguing, but if you have a disagreement, if you're yelling at each other, it's just yelling and emotions come into it.
Yeah, and I think sometimes egos take over. Like you want to stand your ground and make it sound like you're right, but sometimes you may not be right.
Well, I wouldn't really say if it's right or wrong. It's just communicating in a way where it's just so aggressive or assertive.
And you say things that you may not mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which leads to this next point is just being open also means that you have to be open to accepting feedback and criticism, just like work. Like, I think the beauty of our relationship is we don't categorize things. Like, we don't think that this is our love relationship, this is work, this is how I need to act, this is, you know, our friendship, this is how I need to act. Everything works across the board. Like how you treat friends, how you treat each other, how you work, it should all be the same. So if you can accept feedback and criticism from work, why is it so wrong to accept criticism from your partner who knows you the best too? So they should actually give you the best feedback. Yeah. So, like, you shouldn't hold back and be like, oh, I don't want to tell her that her dress looks shit. Like, just tell me it's shit.
100%. And I think it is important to be open to providing feedback as well. Because, you know, initially you're so caught up about hurting the other person. Yeah. But I think the misconception about a relationship is you guys are just dating together. You're just together. But the whole point of it is you're working together. It's how can you both drive each other to achieve a high goal or to grow, to move forward. So I think to have the confidence to actually give you that feedback or criticism, that's the best feedback you can ever get.
Yeah, and I think if you don't give feedback and you're always, you know, either telling white lies, that's, to me, is a lie, and you're making a fake relationship, because over time you have to carry this across for the rest of your life if you do stay with this person. And if you don't say something about something that's making you unhappy, like say that person always came home late and you don't want to make them disappointed, you're like, okay, that's okay, like, you know, just come home whenever you need to. But as it grows into the relationship, truly you're unhappy with it. And if you're unhappy with it, it will become resentment. Like whether or not it will be resented during that situation or something else, there will be resentment.
Yeah. And this relates to us quite significantly as well, is because when it comes to like us as an individual, I like to ask you for feedback or criticism on how I carry myself in my professional world or even in just me. And I like hearing things from you because I expect you to tell me as it is. If it's shit, just tell me it's shit.
Yeah, and like there shouldn't be favoritism. So like say you lashed out on someone, like I'm not saying that you did, this is just an example. Because we have worked together during work, say you gave someone a feedback or you told someone something, I'm not going to favorite you and be like, what you did was right. If I feel that how you treated that person was pretty rude, I'm going to tell you, you shouldn't have treated that person that way. So I think that's the beauty of our relationship, is that we give feedback as a third person. We don't give feedback with a bias opinion.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the strength there, right? Is to be able to separate that.
Yeah.
Personal to work or whatever the scenario is, being able to accept that feedback and criticism from each other is an advantage.
Yeah, I think it's an advantage because this other person say, I'm giving you feedback. I'm helping you see things from a different perspective, especially if you're angry or annoyed. You're very stuck. Same thing when you're arguing, you're just stuck in that situation. Yeah. Whereas I'm helping you see things in a bigger picture.
Yeah.
Same things if like, your friend did something wrong and you're really pissed off because you had this expectation and now you're only saying that person didn't treat you right. You're angry and stuff. And I'm like, okay, hang on, wait a second. That person was just really busy that day. Like, have you thought about them? Didn't have time to do this and this, so they didn't have time to think about you. So that's why it resulted in this. And that helps you think of something from a different way rather than saying, oh, this friend didn't help me.
Yeah.
And then one thing, this is what I like to do in a relationship, which I know that you've picked up. And I do a lot of check-ins with you, like from small to big things, like as small as going out to a dinner and be like, how did you find that dinner? Or as big as something where it's like, how are you feeling about us in the relationship? Like usually that would happen during an anniversary. I'll be like, oh, it's our 5th anniversary. How do you feel about us? Or, just reflecting and doing midpoint check-ins together. And doing that often, I think it's a good thing because sometimes it allows you to create that space where now you know that this is an open conversation. You can talk about things that you liked and things you didn't like. Because sometimes if you don't initiate that, the other person may not feel like they might be waiting for the right time to be like, okay, I want to talk about this. But if you're like, okay, how do you feel about this? Where at this point, was there anything that you really loved? And something that you didn't like you can talk about it. It's like an open table.
Open table, open forum, which is good.
But when I first did that to you, like when you noticed that I was doing a lot of midpoint check-ins, was that weird to you or did you appreciate it?
I think initially it was a bit weird because I wasn't used to, one, expressing myself in that manner. And two, I think it was sort of still us trying to mold together as well as understand how we communicate.
And I think I didn't intentionally want to do those midpoint check-ins, but it just became a thing that I did, I think mainly because you actually didn't tell me how you feel. Like you don't show, how when people are excited for something that's going to happen or excited for a holiday or something, you didn't show those kind of things. So I wanted to know how you feel. So that's when I started being like, are you excited for this? Or, did you want to do this together? Or I'm like, I'm excited for this, but how do you feel? And over time, it just became a thing where it became a midpoint check-in, but I started to see how it was actually really beneficial for a relationship.
Yeah, I think it was good that you started to do that because just me in general, I'm quite emotionless. So I don't express my feelings. I don't, like, for an example, I don't really get excited to events or things.
Yeah, no, I'm the same too. And I think it was helping myself and helping you and then us as a couple.
Yeah. A further thing to add to that is, though, yes, a mid check-in might be daunting to certain people because it may be perceived as like you're just checking in, or maybe it could be annoying to some people, but you can also make it fun. Like, for an example, we make it fun where we pretend we shove a microphone to each other's face and we go, how'd you feel about that?
Yeah.
So we would always do that anytime or every time we would ask or check in. And I think you can do the same thing or similar.
Like a news reporter interview.
It's like, how do you feel about that? Shove a microphone in their face, like, how you feeling, mate?
Yeah, like, make it fun. Like, you know, the relationship is a relationship for a reason, and you're going to share precious memories with each other for a long time if you're intending to have a serious relationship. So, you know, don't always be so serious about everything, and mid-check-ins are always great to initiate that open forum, which is, you know, relates back to a few of our points that we mentioned.
Yep. So another one that I feel that had a massive impact to our relationship is an obvious one though, but to be honest with each other. So don't be afraid to speak your mind, and really just to forget about that white lie stuff. Yeah. Which kind of relates to something we've pointed out, but I think this is something I've learned a lot from you. Like, you're very straightforward. Aside from your being closed from the initial thing, but you're very straightforward in a way that if you're not liking something, you'd be like, nah. If you really like something, you're like, oh yeah, kind of thing. Like, it's just very straightforward. Like, what you see is what you get. Like, you don't need to be so afraid or want to step around eggshells and stuff, because that's not what a relationship should be. Yeah, you should be able to just be open and say, no, I don't like it, or I want to do that, or would you like to do this, or you look good in that, or, you know, you should be able to do that freely. Yeah, and an example of this is like, you know, we say we went to a food market and stuff. I try a lot of these foods, so I really like Asian food. You don't like Asian food as much. Like, you like it, but you're not as passionate about it as I am. And at the very start of the relationship, especially when we're learning about each other, you, like, rather than saying like, oh, you know, when you go out with friends or you go out with a colleague and someone's like, oh, this food's really good, you kind of feel like you're inclined to be like, oh yeah, this is pretty good. Whereas like you don't have that. You're like, nah, that was shit. Or you're like, nah, I didn't like it. And at first, like, obviously, yeah, that hurt me, because I'm like, okay, that's one less thing that I can share with you. But that, like, if you think about it in the bigger picture, then it's like, then now it means we can try more things and experience something that we both like together. Yeah. And that's why, like I said, it's good to be upfront with your feelings and that sort of stuff. Yeah, like feelings or anything that you like or you don't like, and that kind of hashes out all the bullshit in the end, because early on in the relationship, so you don't have to find out about that maybe later down the track, and you're like, oh, I thought you've always liked chocolate, and really you didn't, like, you don't like sweets. Yeah, and this relates to this point where you don't forget about you. You know, you as an individual, you have hobbies, you have passions to help yourself grow, and I think you can share these things and experiences and stories with each other. Yeah, I think what a relationship is actually just two really strong individuals who are coming together to make something like an even bigger impact or even bigger relationship. So you're sharing your individual knowledge and growth together to help each other grow. Yeah. Yeah. And that's why it's really important to not just work on the relationship, but work on yourself by doing things externally and sharing those things, because sharing those things can really show your partner your passion to certain things and what you truly enjoy. Yeah. Then your partner will know, okay, well, he or she enjoys this. So maybe I can try it one day. If you try it and you don't like it, then that's cool. There's and then like things. It builds
a personality as well, because if you're being with someone who doesn't really do things for themselves or help themselves grow, as straightforward as it sounds, there's no substance behind that person.
100%. And because you have no substance, then how, your partner's not going to enjoy it. It's not going to be anything that they can build off to.
For example, well, I'm learning a piano piece. I play piano, and I've hit a milestone. I can come to you and be like, hey, I've actually finally learnt this page of the piano thing, as opposed to not doing anything. I've got no short stories to share.
Yeah, and a fun fact is, I fucking suck at musical, and I don't really like it. But you somehow managed to convince me to try and learn piano. So at one point,
I didn't really try very hard. You did it yourself.
Well,
so.
Yeah.
The passion rubbed off on you.
Yeah, I think it's the passion of how you, I guess, play and your expressions that's made me try.
I also made you fall in love with matcha. You didn't like matcha, remember?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And now every time we go out, you're like, ooh,
I just eat matcha, yeah.
Or you would be the one that points out.
Yeah, so it's like sharing that experience, and that experience in turn influenced me to enjoy it too. So, yeah.
And people change and mold, and, growing together is actually a thing, because, you can see from those experiences you've grown to love some of the things that I love, and I grow into some of the things that I love.
Yeah.
I mean, you love. I didn't make any sense at all.
But I mean, this actually relates to the next point, which is experience.
The last point.
The next and last point, sorry, which is to be open to try things and experience moments together, which is what we were talking about before. Like, you always love matcha, and I didn't like it, and it was the experience and your influence that's made me appreciate. And not just that, we used to fine dining.
Yeah, well, it's just being
and that stuff.
Open to try those things.
Yeah, being open to sort of try those things. Even before degustations, I didn't I'm a guy who I like food with quantity. So if I know I'm paying $10, I want $10 worth of shit. You know what I'm saying?
Stacked, piled chicken.
Because I'm all about value for money, But what I didn't realize is fine dining is about art and the appreciation of how food is made and the taste. The preparation. And I think that experience with you has rubbed onto me, because now I really do appreciate that finer foods and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and also you got to think about it, or how I see it is, yeah, you pay $10 for a stacked on, meal, but that's one plate with all the food. Whereas when you go fine dining, you get 7 to 9 courses. So that food is spread out between the 9 courses. And in the end, you actually get really full, because there's also complimentary dishes that come with it. So, but this is personal preference. If you and your partner don't enjoy fine dining, that's cool. But it's a good example is that how if you're open to try things, you may end up enjoying it.
Yeah, 100%. And you can also say that I influence you to being more active, right?
Not really. But you helped me in terms of growing and learning the knowledge within the fitness scene. I've always been into fitness, but it's just how you've taught me and kept me motivated in it, because you hear people who sign up to gym, they go for a month or a few months, then they stop. That was me, but it was because I didn't know what I was doing. But you kind of taught me what I needed to do and kept me going, and just that motivation. But what I wanted to link back to was open to try things and experience moments together. But it's don't think of things it's a girls thing, a girls group thing, guys don't belong there, or vice versa. Be open to try things and do things together. Nothing's off limits. And a good example of that, I do like cars, but I'm not into cars like on your level, where you guys always talk about how to mod cars and hang out with like all your car friends and stuff. But for me as a person, I really enjoy going to see or experience the things that you enjoy. So say, for example, you hang out with your car friends and you guys just talk about cars and models and parts and stuff all night. But I truly want to go there and hang out with you and your friends just to see what you're passionate about.
Yeah.
And like, whoops, sorry, I didn't mean to cut. It's not like, oh, that's a guy's thing, I shouldn't go there. It's more like being open, get rid of that societal view of what's a guy's thing or what's a girl's thing to do, and just go there and just, experience it.
Yeah, that was basically what I was going to say as well, is to be open to experience things without having that social media expectation of what defines what a man or a female can or can't do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is very important to give it a go, to be open. And that's what gives you that experience.
Yeah. Well, that is our 10 tips. Let's just sum it up in a nutshell. So don't start off a relationship with materialistic expectations. Understand each other's love and argument language.
Yeah, understand what the other person's habit versus what their character is. Listen before reacting, then speaking your mind. Be comfortable with communicating, reflecting, and discussing problems or issues.
Yeah, be an open forum. Be open to accepting feedback and criticism, and know that this will help you as an individual and the relationship grow. Remember to do midpoint check-ins often, whether it's a big thing or a small thing. Be honest with each other. Don't forget about yourself. And lucky last,
be open to try new things and experience those moments together.
Nothing is off limits.
Yeah. So just remember, this is 10 top tips that obviously has worked for us. So it may or may not work for you, but
interested to see what you guys have, the ones that have had relationship experience or even haven't. Like, what do you think is a good relationship tip that we can share around?
100%. Well, that's it. Thank you for your time.
And happy 10th year anniversary.
Yo!
X digit or X Roman numeral letter.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, goodbye.
Yeah, right. Okay, see ya.
Bye.
Thank you so much if you have reached to the end. We really appreciate you for tuning in. And if you like what you hear, please share it with your friends or family and subscribe to our podcast on whatever platform you are listening to.
Make sure you share any topics you'd like us to cover or questions you might have to our Instagram.
Slide it into our DMs.
Bigger. You can also stay in the loop of all the behind the scenes and the release of our new episodes there too. Our Instagram is Ask the Duo Podcast. That's AskTheDuoPodcast. Man, feels like I'm in a spelling bee competition right now. Alright, that's it for now, and we'll see you back here for our next episode. Bye!
See ya!